Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by the prospect experts here at the Hockey Writers, Peter Baracchini and Dayton Reimer. Guys, we're days away from the Memorial Cup, and this is perfect timing because we're going to do a preview here on Prospect Corner, and lots of great names in this Memorial Cup, lots of 2024 eligible prospects. So this is going to be a great tournament, lots of great teams. And we're going to go through each of them and talk about some players to watch, the team in general, how they got here. But Peter, how's it going?
It's going great. Yeah, we talk about how big the World Juniors are, the Hlinka Gretzky U18s. This is still pretty big for players that are still draft eligible. And, prospects for all teams that are involved. You look at all the ones that have already been drafted and, the names that you think should be stepping up and leading their team are definitely doing just that. So, yeah, it's great to see some of the best prospects in the game and those, coming up to see improve their worth right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of them are having some big performances throughout the playoffs as they've gotten to the Memorial Cup. So, and even the Saginaw Spirit, who are the hosts, they didn't win the championship, but almost got there. Were beaten by the eventual winners. So, I mean, that's always something. And but they have
nothing to laugh at,
right? They're not a bad team. I mean, they could definitely contend here too. And Dayton, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. It's been a rainy couple of days here in Saskatoon, so just hunkering down, getting some articles done. Finally got another prospect profile done. I feel like I've been lagging behind a little bit, so it's nice to get that off the off the docket, I guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna be jumping right into all that because the Canucks are now eliminated from the playoffs, so that's now it's off-season mode and draft stuff. So I'll be going right into that too. So yeah, so there you go. All right, well, let's jump into our Memorial Cup preview here, and we're going to each kind of focus. Well, it's not just one person be talking. We'll kind of jump in, but we're going to have each of us preview each of the teams. And Dayton is going to start with the Moose Jaw Warriors, who WHL champions, beat your Saskatoon Blades, unfortunately, but they're a great team. So lots of great stuff with them going through the dub. And Dayton, get us going with how they got here and what can everyone expect from them in the Memorial Cup?
Yeah, so they finished in the Eastern Conference third. Technically, they had the second most points in the Eastern Conference in the WHL, but because of the way that the divisions are, they finished third. So that's how it ended up. Their first round matchup put them against the Brandon Wheat Kings, and that was no contest. The Warriors swept them in 4 games, outscored them 24 goals to 14. Like, they didn't score less than 4 goals in a single game and had 2 of 6. It was a dominant performance from some of the best prospects in the WHL. Next series went very similarly. They faced the Swift Current Broncos, who finished second in the Eastern. And the Broncos got the first win, beating them 7-2. It's like, oh, is this going to be quite the series? No, the Warriors took the next 4. And in those games, the Warriors also didn't score less than 4 goals. They did in the first one, of course, right? 7-2, but then, didn't look back. Third round, I saw several of these games against the Blades. Very much back and forth. I mentioned earlier that 6 of the 7 games went to overtime, which is an insane amount of overtime. I think it's a WHL record. I did not confirm that, but that's, very evenly matched. Saskatoon finished first in the league, as well as the Eastern Conference, right? So this was always going to be their toughest matchup, and it was practically guaranteed that the two would meet. If it wasn't going to be them, it was going to be Saskatoon and Swift Current. And to compare, my train of thought just jumped. So 24 goals against the series in Brandon. And that was 4 games. The Warriors scored 24 goals in 7 games against the Blades. It was very evenly matched, and they allowed 22 from the Blades. But it did come down to, an overtime win in Saskatoon, put them into the finals against the Portland Winterhawks, who they swept in 4 games. They're just such a dominant force, and they have really shown that they are the top team in the WHL. They had the 3rd most goals during the regular season, and they will outscore you. They have such a strong roster of goal scorers.
I mean, the thing is all the teams in this in the Memorial Cup are all high end teams. There was no upset. There was no ones that were like, oh, they shouldn't be here. What the heck? Why are they here? Like I say, even the hosts aren't really ones that are like, why? Sometimes the hosts are in it and you're like, well, they finished so low. But they end up being one of the stronger teams here too. So yeah, it's going to be a fun tournament. Give us some players to watch from the Warriors. Like they do, like you said, lots of high end goal scoring. Who should everyone kind of be keeping an eye on in the Memorial Cup coming up?
Yes. So top guy you are going to want to watch is Yager. We've talked about him all season long. He's been incredible. He was the top scorer of the WHL, and he continued that in the playoffs. He put up 32 points in 20 games. Offhand, I think he had 14 goals. I didn't write that down, and I closed the tab. So we'll go with 14. I'm pretty sure it's around there. He's their leading scorer, and I believe he's also the leading scorer in the playoffs for the WHL. Next, you got Brayden Yager. Or is it Brandon? Now I'm blanking.
Brayden.
It is Brayden.
Yeah. Brayden.
Yeah, you ever have those little oh my, did I just say it wrong? Completely questioning all your knowledge. Yeah, so he finished 2nd on the Warriors with 27 points. He had 11 goals. Again, another great scorer, another great puck mover. 3rd, you've got Matthew Zator, who was a top 10 pick, or just outside of it, at the WHL, or not WHL, the NHL draft. He's was a deadline acquisition and has proven his worth time and time again. He's been an incredible force for the Warriors, really solidified that top line. On defense, you've got Denton Matejchuk, who has put up 30 points in 20 games. He's by far the most productive defenseman in the WHL playoffs this year. And then in net, you have a draft-eligible Jackson Unger, who has been pretty solid. He could make or break the team, so he will be one to watch just as the Memorial Cup starts. He was really good against the series against the Blades. It's just he would stop 40 shots a game. He was able to respond very quickly to any sort of changes in the environment. And his save percentage is a little on the lower side at a 910, but I don't think that quite reflects how good he has been in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I think goaltending is going to be obviously, goaltending is always a big thing in these tournaments because they're very short. And if you don't get some good goaltending, you're probably going to be out pretty quick when we get to the semifinal. But yeah, they do have a lot. Looking at the names, they are dotted with a lot of elite talent from, like say, forwards and defense. Yeah, for sure. What do you think is going to be an X factor for them? I mean, it could be a player, it could be something in their, style of play or something like that. But what do you think an X factor will be in this tournament? Like I said, it's a very short one. So, I mean, just a role player could make a difference in this, but it's usually the stars that do it. But what do you got for an X factor?
Yeah, well, one thing that they're not going to struggle with is scoring. This team is made up of scorers all throughout the lineup. When their top guys can't get the puck into the net, the depth guys do, and they've got guys who have just kind of risen to the occasion, and Atlee Calvert and Martin Rasavi. I forgot his first name, but Kovacevic and Brayden Sherman. They are playing in the depth part of the lineup, and yet they're still chipping in points and goals throughout. What they do struggle with is starting quickly.
Hmm.
In 10 of their 20 playoff games, they have allowed the first goal, which I feel like is kind of high to have won so many games. They are frequently coming back from deficits, and they are able to do that. And it did break my heart a little bit when they were able to come back against the Blades. I think there was 2 4-goal leads that the Blades blew, or if you want to look at it, the Warriors closed. So they're going to need to start quicker. And if they can't, and they're continuing to fight from deficits and make up that gap, it's going to be a lot harder to do that at the Memorial Cup with such a short tournament.
Especially, I mean, all the teams are ridiculously good too. So I mean, I don't know if you're going to be able to come back against some of these. I mean, some of them are really good defensively if you look at the stats from the regular season. So yeah, we'll see how that all kind of plays out for the Warriors in this tournament. Peter, do you want to add anything to the Warriors discussion and players to watch? Anyone that hasn't been mentioned here?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a little bit difficult with the time change, but I still managed to keep up and watch as many of the games as possible. And, I just want to add how awesome it was that all 3 of the champions all swept their series.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's absolutely very impressive. So this is going to be an absolute offensive, like, dogfight kind of thing in this Memorial Cup, or something we haven't seen. Yeah, no, I mean, they're deep throughout the whole entire lineup. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You look at the leaders, they're Moose Jaws 1, 2, 3, 4 in scoring with Burkus, Matejchuk, Yager, and Savoy. I mean, what? I mean, that's absolutely phenomenal. And again, it's their big boys stepping up and having a great postseason. And we saw Burkus dominate the regular season, and he just dominated the playoffs again as well. Yeah, no, nothing really new to add except for the fact that they are definitely like a powerhouse up front and on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely is going to go well for them because, it's going to be hard to contain all 4 of them, especially Matejchuk too, because you got to worry about him on the back end because he can kind of activate as that 4th forward whenever he's on the ice, but he's very smart about it. So, all 4 of those players have been doing great things, and I just hope that, it continues for them because they got a lot of potential to, or have made their case, obviously, to prove that they want to be CHL champs.
It's going to be fun to see how like you say, with all their stars that they've got, because there's a lot of them. And, speaking of the stars, I talk about the London Knights, Peter. I mean, they led 88 goals in the playoffs. That's ridiculous. I mean, to score that many over the playoffs, and they dominated. They swept their final series. Beat the Saginaw Spirit in the series before that. Run us through the Knights. I mean, they had a great regular season and obviously a great playoffs. Won the OHL championship. How'd they get here? And yeah, run us through that.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a plus 42 goal differential, yeah, you're going to be on display. I mean, it's absolutely, this is basically one of those London Knights teams to remember that I think can basically outmatch that 2016 team where they had Mitch Marner, Matthew Tkachuk, and Christian Dvorak as their top line, because they're just as deep, just as talented. And, the Hunters, they want the most from their players, and they definitely got it from their star players. Yeah, you're removed from when they lost the championship series. I think they're definitely back with a vengeance. They lost 4-2 to the Peterborough Petes, but the goaltender that won last year is now on their side, Michael Simpson, and he's been absolutely dynamic for them during the series. But you look how dominant they have been. I mean, they've only lost 2 games in this whole entire postseason. They have swept 3 of their 4 series. And the only one that basically give them a fit was the Saginaw Spirit, another deep, talented OHL team, the host this season for the Memorial Cup. I mean, you go back to when they swept the Flint Firebirds. Yeah, it was kind of close at times, but it was still a series sweep. You would have thought the Kitchener Rangers would have provided a bit more of a fight because that's always a fun series to watch. Nope. London swept them. Then you go to Saginaw, and then, there's that 4-2 series where, 1 versus 2. That's an ideal matchup for, to go on to the championship. And, London battled through. Whenever there was a loss, they answered the call. And then just absolutely lights out during the actual championship series against Oshawa Generals, sweeping them 4-0. I was looking at the numbers. They averaged 7.75 goals per game in that championship series. You look at it, it was 8-1, 9-1, 7-6, went to double overtime. That game 3 was a massive turning point for the Knights in that comeback. They were down like 6-1, 6-2 at one point. And that was basically a comeback for the ages in that game. And then, just dismantling them 7-1. I think it was like Ruslan Gazasov who scored the second goal, and he was doing the little whole like violin thing to the crowd. I'm like, I mean, you don't want to taunt the crowd, but man, they were like stone cold killers from the beginning of the puck drop to the very end, whistle when it hit 0-0-0. I mean, this London Knights team is the real deal. I mean, and you look at their star players or, the leaderboards. Eason Cowan led the league in playoff scoring with 34 points, and not far behind him, obviously Oshawa, Callum Ritchie was second, Senesville Manis was third, but Denver Barkey was fourth with 27 points. Kasper Haltinen with 26, not far behind. You had death players like Max McHugh, Jacob Julian, Oliver Bonk. Everyone was stepping up. Sam Dickinson, who's draft eligible, noticeable at times, but the points weren't there, but he was solid all the way through with his, two-way game. I mean, this is the team that, had aspirations to come back and dominate, and they absolutely did.
Yeah, I mean, do they really have any weaknesses in their game? I mean, do you think anything could derail them in the Memorial Cup? I mean, it doesn't seem like they do.
I mean, again, fine-tuned machine, both up front and on the back end. I think if there's any weakness to them, it's the fact that, the extracurricular stuff, they got guys that are in your face and intense. Like I mentioned, Jacob Julian, Jackson Edwards, they've dealt with a number of suspensions during this postseason as well, some not really good ones. But they managed to power through that with the depth that they've had. I think if they really want to show their dominance, they can't get into too much of the extracurricular activities, because we know how talented they are. We know that they hurt you with all 4 lines and all 3 defensive pairings. Also, I just want to give a shout out to Henry Bistevich, because he was the one who scored that game-winning goal off a great point shot from Isaiah George, and it was just an easy tap in that double overtime. And yeah, so you have like other players that don't get a lot of action or a lot of minutes in ice time, still manage to prove their worth, just like Brstevich, acting as that fourth forward there. Again, great point shot from George. I think that's the main issue with this team, but they got the forwards, they got the defense, they got the goaltender and Michael Simpson. He's been their backstop throughout the whole entire time. That bad game, that double overtime game, but he bounced back with a strong game himself in game 4. So yeah, I mean, hard to find any weaknesses with this team other than, just cooler heads prevailing at certain points.
For sure. Who are the players to watch? You mentioned a few of them there quickly. Who are the guys that you're kind of watching for sure? I know Easton Cowan because Maple Leafs prospect, right? But there's, like you mentioned, quite a few names. Who should everyone kind of be watching throughout the Memorial Cup here?
Again, it's hard to pinpoint one, but if I had to choose one, it's going to be Kasper Haltinen. I've been a big fan of his. I mean, on the show last year, the show this year, how I praise him, how I kind of patted myself on the back, having him as kind of a first, but at least still having him as that early second. And man, are the San Jose Sharks just salivating with what this guy could do with his shot and his offensive presence on the power play, even strength. He leads the league, or he led the playoffs, OHL playoffs with goals with 17, 8 power play goals and 8 power play assists. And I think he's had like multiple hat tricks. It was games 2 and 3 where he had back-to-back hat tricks, 3 points in game 2, 4 points in game 3, and 3 points in game 4. He could have had a 3-game performance where he had a hat trick, but I think Oliver Bonk deflected one of his other goals that went in. I don't know. I think it still could have been Haltonen's, but to score 8 goals in 3 games, I mean, wow. I mean, again, just like everybody else on this team, wow, wow, wow. You know, he has that, that main power forward mentality, the physicality, the ability to separate from the puck from player. And again, that shot is just absolutely phenomenal. I was raving about it last year, and I'm still going to rave about it right now. So he's definitely, I mean, again, hard to pinpoint one. I mean, obviously Cowan with the playmaking, Barkey with his playmaking and speed. You know what? They have a lot of small guys on their team, but they play like they're 6'2", 6'3". So don't have to worry about with Haltonen, but he's progressed very well throughout the season, and he's going to be my top player to watch out of a bunch of players to watch.
Yeah, I mean, San Jose Sharks sure got a good guy. I mean, they've got some high-end prospects too, but Halton's sure kind of burst out lately as being one of their top prospects. So yeah, lots of good stuff to look forward to with him. And I mean, there's so many other players the London Knights have. Dayton, did you want to add to that at all, or is it kind of all been said here?
I mean, yeah, Peter pretty much nailed it. They have such a strong offense. They're I think, several of their top scorers were leading the OHL in goals. Already mentioned Haltonen, but just behind him is Eason Cowan with 10 goals. He finished 4th in the scoring. Jacob Julian, maybe a bit more of a lesser known name, but still 9 goals in 18 games. So yeah, this is another team I think that are pretty much on par with how much the Warriors dominated the WHL. It's a very strong team, and 3 sweeps. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like you said, the Saginaw Spirit were the only ones that that put up a bit of a fight with them, and they're a really good team too. So lots of fun to see what the London Knights can do in the Memorial Cup against all these other great teams too. All right, well, speaking of the Saginaw Spirit, they're by default, they're in this tournament because they are the host, but it's by no means that they don't deserve to be here. They deserve to be here. How well they've played throughout the regular season. They put up a fight against the eventual OHL champs. They kind of loaded up their team, for the Memorial Cup, thinking that, well, they are the host, so to get as best of a chance that they can at the championship. So even if you don't win the actual thing, it's you're still here. I mean, so you still want to kind of load up and hopefully be able to do something in the tournament, even though you didn't win your league, right? So the fact, they started out against the Barrie Colt, not the Barrie Colt. I'm looking at the wrong team here. I'm gonna have to. There we go. Owenstown Attack. They swept them to start the playoffs, and then went into a pretty big battle in the second round with the Sioux Greyhounds, and that was going to Game 7. They won that in Game 7, going against one Canucks prospect, Kudryavtsev. He had a great series there against the Spirit, against Josh Bloom, who is also a Canucks prospect as well, playing for the Spirit. They got through that in Game 7, moved on to round 3 against the London Knights, against the eventual OHL champs, and like I say, put up a pretty big fight. They weren't blown out, except maybe one game 7-3. But they also blew out the London Knights 6-2 in game 3. So a lot of the games were close. London Knights they won 3-1 a few times. 4-2. It was a pretty tight series overall in a 6-game series. So, I mean, the London Knights, as much as we were saying how powerful they are offensively, the Spirit went right with them and made them actually play and not think that they'll steamroll another team. So, I mean, like you said, Peter, 1-2 matchup, and they battled and were able to put them into a pretty big tight battle throughout the series. So the Spirit, lots of pretty good names as well for players to watch. I already mentioned Josh Bloom. He's been pretty good throughout the playoffs. He's got 11 points. And then you got Owen Beck. We all know how good he is, Montreal Canadiens prospect. Has already played an NHL game, but that was an emergency recall. I think it was last season. And he's had a pretty good regular season, 14 points in the playoffs. And Hunter Height, who we've talked about quite a bit as well, and got 9 goals in the playoffs. And Rodman Toninico, who leads the playoffs leads their team with 17 points. There's another guy to kind of keep an eye on. But I think the bigger guy, and then you got, of course, draft eligible Zane Parekh, who we all know how much he scored and had points in the regular season with, I believe, 92. Not dominating as much in the playoffs. He's got 9 assists. And most of his points have been assists. So, I mean, he's not dominating as much as the regular season, but still doing a pretty good job. And he's going to be one of the defensemen to watch throughout the tournament, because we all know how good offensively he can be. And in a short tournament, he can maybe catch fire and be a big difference maker too. So, throughout the regular season, the Spirit were a pretty good two-way team. They were great offensively, pretty good defensively. In the playoffs, they haven't been as good defensively. They've been allowing a lot more goals, a lot closer in the goal differential than they were in the regular season. But anything can happen in this type of short tournament. So I think the Spirit, even though they aren't coming in as a champion, I think are going to have a pretty big chance of being, making it to the final and putting up a big fight against these powerhouses we've talked about already. I think they're going to have a pretty big chance, even though, they kind of, I don't want to say backed in, but your default. So, I mean, you didn't win yourself to go in, but I think they're definitely deserving of being here. Guys, have anything to add about the Spirit going in here?
I just want to say, their leading scorer is not who you would expect. I mean, we would all expect, Zane Parekh to lead the way, Luke Misa, but, with the Spirit, it's all scoring by committee because they do have that depth. But Rodwin Dionisio leading the way with 17 points is actually very impressive. And I think he just got his ELC done already as a result of his stellar play, in the OHL playoffs. So big shout out to him, because he was really dynamite. And, he was a really big factor in that series against the London Knights for the Spirit. I mean, he was absolutely dynamic, and many thought that maybe Zane Parekh would probably take over. Maybe not as much. I don't know if that's going to put a damper on Parech's, draft stock, but it's good to see other players step it up in the playoffs, because that's what you want to see, right? So I just wanted to give a big shout out to him, because he was really, really dynamic for the Spirit on the back end.
Yeah, like the 17 points. That's he only had. I just had this stat up, but 25 goals, 73 points in the regular season, which is pretty good for a defenseman. But coming into the playoffs, having 17 points in a very short time, it is surprising that he is one of the bigger guy and not Parekh, of how many points he put up in the season. But they had two dynamic defensemen during the regular season with those two. So yeah, Dionisio is definitely a guy to watch, and Anaheim Ducks 5th round pick. So, I mean, that's not even a high pick. So there's a guy to watch for Anaheim, another defenseman that they have in their system. All right, let's move to the QMJHL. The Drummondville Voltigeurs was the other QMJHL champion, and they won again, a sweep in their final series. Dayton, did you want to go through their road to the Memorial Cup here?
Sure. So we talked a lot about how dominant the Warriors were, how dominant the London Knights were, and then how strong the Saginaw Spirit looked, right? I don't think anyone was quite as dominant as Drummondville, because they just came in and they swept their first series. They lost 2 games to Sherbrooke, lost a game to Victoria, and then swept their final against the top team, who had also just lost 1 game in their playoffs. And that was Baikamo Drakkar. So, yeah, they finished first in the Western Conference. 48 wins. They had 306 goals, which I believe led the QMJHL. So they, again, another team that just continuously put the puck in the net. And they continued to do that throughout the series. They, just absolutely destroyed their competition. Their first game against the St. John Sea Dogs, 7-3. And then the next one, 6-2. And to close out that series, they put up 8 goals and allowed just 1. Dominance. Again, against the Sherbrooke Phoenix, they had 7 goals in game 3. They had 6 goals in game 6 to close out the series. They definitely know how to put the puck in the net.
And the thing is about the Q, it's like, okay, it's big scoring, and that's just how they all seem to be able to score goals. But yeah, I think they'll be able to compete in the Memorial Cup even with all that goal scoring.
Yeah, we definitely have overlooked the QMJHL a bit this year
Yeah,
because they don't
we have
draft talent.
Yeah.
But I think Drummondville has shown that they can't be overlooked.
All right, Peter, give us some players to watch on Drummondville. Like I say, we don't have many draft eligibles kind of talk about around, but they're still a really dominant team.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously they were led the way by, Ethan Gauthier with 25 points in those 19 games with 14 goals. And, I was, on the Gauthier bandwagon. I was trying to push for him as a first rounder. Or at least I would take him in the first round. And we're seeing why. He's got that dog in him. He's got that ability to be relentless on the attack, the forecheck, the speed, the pace. He's been dynamic at every level that he's played in. Even at like major tournaments too, like even in that Hlinka Gretzky Cup, that 1 year when he was just like scoring goals left, right, and center. I mean, he was leading the offensive charge, and although he may not be a big time offensive player at the NHL level, he's going to be a factor on both sides of the puck, and that speed and tenacity is going to be huge for him, and it's been evident throughout this whole entire tournament. It's hard to say that he was the one to lead the way, but he really was. And that's not to say that, they don't have any other players. I mean, there was Luke Woodworth, who had 24 points in 19 games as well. Michael Hache, I believe that's the pronunciation of his name, had 20 points as well. So, they got key contributions from their key players right there. All 3 are forwards, all 3 led the way. And then you had Alexei Gendron, 19 points in 15 games. It was mostly all their forwards doing the heavy lifting. Their best defenseman was Vsevolod Komarov, who had 15 and 19. But that their forwards can do a lot of damage. So I again, kind of like to Dayton's point where, the offense is going to be there, but is it probably going to be enough to push them forward in this tournament? We'll see. But I mean, you don't want to count anybody out in this tournament. No. It's short. It's, one win can be the difference. It can be the difference maker between moving on or going home. And we've seen how many underrated teams have flown under the radar and have come out on top. And especially, I think the last 2 championships were from the Q. So if I'm not mistaken, and obviously the Quebec Remparts last year were just absolutely dominant, but, now it's last year, this is this year. And again, not to say to count them out, but do not count them out. Because they definitely have the forechecking, the ability to get under your skin and get in your face as well.
Yeah, you're looking at, like you said, you don't count any teams out in these types of tournaments. I believe it was 2 years ago, the hosts won, and they were not even a team that should have even, they were kicked out of the playoffs, I think, in the second round. Everyone's like, oh, why are they, they're not gonna have a chance. They won it. So I mean, it's something like these quick tournaments. If you can get a goaltender on a roll, or a key forward that just runs over everyone, it can make a huge difference. So I mean, I think you just don't, any team that's here, it's like you make it there, anything can happen. And that's how that's all these teams, that's how they look at it too. So but most of the time it's the dominant teams are the ones that win it, but you never know with especially the host team, because they draw from the crowd, and it is something. It does make a difference. All right. Before we move on to the last half of the show here, I just got to talk about our Substack here at the Hockey Writers. Lots of great stuff coming. We've got already going on with the draft coming up in a month and a bit. It's coming up quick. We're almost close to about a month away. So lots of content here, on the Substack, on the hockeywriters.com, and connected to that. Dayton, I know we got that big board out there. We mentioned that in the last episode, and then the team specific articles too. And I'm sure there's some other stuff in the works. Give us a sneak peek of what's coming up.
Yeah. Most recently, I got a piece put out about what I'm calling the left defenseman conundrum. And I think that, like, we've all known about the right shot versus the left shot, but I think at the first round of the 2024 draft, it's really going to become evident. I'm also working on a few more deep dives, hopefully get one or two more. They just take a long time to write. And then checking out some of the draft eligibles in the Memorial Cup. I had a couple of pieces come out earlier for the teams that were eliminated in the first round, because there was a whole bunch of them and a lot of guys made some good progress. So final one, if you've been following my WHL journey, a third episode is coming out in a week or two. So that, yeah, lots of stuff coming up.
Lots of content. So make sure to subscribe to that. Lots of fun stuff in the premium stack of the prospects and draft. We also got, you sign up, you got access to everything. It's not just the prospects, it's hockey history, any team you want in the NHL. You have access to it all. So make sure checking all that out in the description below. All right, well, let's move. We'll keep talking about the 2024 draft. And I'll start with you, Peter, on which one do you think is going to have the biggest impact in this tournament? We mentioned a few already. We got Zane Parekh, Sam Dickinson. Who that is draft eligible do you think will make the biggest difference in this tournament?
Oh man, yeah, that's a tough question right there. I mean, it's really tough because a lot of the names have already been drafted. But there's, again, like you said, there's still a lot of good underrated names that really haven't made themselves known at the moment. But you got to look at the London Knights with Sam Dickinson. I've been a very, very big fan of his. We all know how I can't stop talking about him because of the fact that he's very dynamic on the back end. He's got that strong physical two-way game where he could be effective on both sides of the puck. That to me is has really stood out in a big way for the London Knights, and a big reason why they're there. Again, like I said off the top of the show, points probably weren't there, but he was definitely a factor with his play off the puck awareness. I think he just needs to increase his physicality just a tad bit more. Use that to his advantage a little bit, but he's definitely played a big part for the Knights to this point with the extra minutes, the heavy workload, and everything like that. Expect him to put his best up against the powerhouses from the other teams, and I would think maybe the Saginaw Spirit would like to get some revenge, but I don't think Sam Dickinson is going to have that because of his ability to be a strong two-way force on the ice. And again, I wrote his profile, his gap control, his awareness, his ability to get into the lanes and use that stick to break up plays is very, very effective. Forwards have a hard time getting around him as a result of that. So he's definitely going to be my main. I mean, I've watched him all year, but he's definitely going to be in the spotlight even more right now. And if he can rise into that occasion, I mean, I've had him as my top defender all season. I still stand by that, even though he is a left-hand shot. Um, I think it would just improve his stock even more, and whoever drafts him is going to be very, very happy that they have that steady two-way forward with an Aaron Ekblad type play style.
Yeah, I think if he has a pretty good, just a good defense, really good defensively in the tournament, it makes a difference that way. Like, we know he can score too. I mean, he's shown that, but he's definitely going to be one to watch throughout this tournament. Dayton, you have anyone that you think is going to make a big difference that's going to be drafted this year?
Yeah, I think Jackson Unger for the Moose Jaw Warriors could be one of the most important factors for that team. Like I'd mentioned, he hadn't been super consistent. There were a few times he did allow a few goals, but the Warriors defense has been pretty strong and helped him out quite a bit. And then I watched him in the Blades series, and he was very consistent. He has the ability to steal shows and just shut the door if he's getting a ton of shots. And he's very consistent. He's very calm in net. I really liked his ability to just control the rebounds. He seemed to be doing very well at that. And yeah, very few obvious weaknesses in his game. And if he can keep that against some of the toughest teams in Canada, or the CHL, I guess, Saginaw's not Canadian, he could help them win their first championship. This is the first time the Moose Jaw's ever been in the Memorial Cup, and I think they're a contender to take it home if Unger steps it up.
Yeah, I mean, in a draft that doesn't have a lot of high-end goaltenders, he can maybe climb some rungs in the rankings there. Last chance, really, to showcase yourself. I said the last one was the under 18s. Really, this one is. I mean, the Memorial Cup is, but there's just not a ton of them involved in it right now. But yeah, anyone that is definitely could, maybe sway some scouts that were maybe on the fence about him. We'll see. I think Zane Parekh could have a really big difference for Saginaw. I mean, like I said, he hasn't been as dominant offensively in the playoffs as he was in the regular season, but like I say, in a short tournament like this, if he can get on a bit of a roll, can definitely make a difference on the back end with already Dionisio, how confident he is offensively. He maybe he's just being overshadowed by him. I don't know. He's just not putting up as many points as he did. So still okay. I mean, 9 points is, but just when a guy puts up 90 something in the regular season, only 9 in the playoffs, it's kind of or 10, I guess it is, 9 assists, 1 goal. But yeah, I think he's definitely still one to watch because he's an exciting defenseman. All right, let's do some predictions. I know the Memorial Cup will still be going on when we got to have our next episode, but we got to lock these in because if we start already the tournament going, we can kind of sway our judgment a bit. So I'll start with you, Peter. Who do you think will be in the final?
I'm thinking it's going to be WHL versus OHL, London versus Moose Jaw. I think that both teams have, again, like I said, we don't want to count any other team out, but London and Moose Jaw have been just too dynamic and too much of a powerhouse in their respective leagues in order to not be there. I think instead of seeing an underdog, I think we're going to see two of the best teams overall go head to head and battle it out.
Yeah, definitely 2 good picks. Dayton, who do you have in the final?
Well, for something completely different, I'm going to pick Moose Jaw and London. Yeah,
different.
Like you mentioned, you can't count any of these teams out. And I was looking over Drummondville's team. They have an incredible goalie. He's been lights out, Riley Mercer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is related to Dawson Mercer. He's a younger brother. 20-year-old undrafted, but he's got a .934 save percentage and a 189 goals against average. Like, that's for a tournament that doesn't have a lot of standout goalies. He might be one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a lot of really experienced players on Saginaw. They're the most experienced team by far in the tournament. They loaded up with like Owen Beck and Jorian Donovan and just a lot of really, really good veterans in the league. But I just can't see how Moose Jaw and London, who have some of the most dynamic offenses I've ever seen, not make it to the final. Moose Jaw, especially, just capitalized on every mistake that their opponents made, which is how they were able to claw back from so many deficits. They didn't come out guns blazing, but they capitalized whenever they had the chance. They're just a really smart, tough team. I wasn't able to watch London as much, but when you have a guy scoring 17 goals in 18 games, you know that's nothing you can really handle well.
No, I want to be a bit of an outside and make a bold one, but I can't. It's gonna be London and Moose Jaw for me too. I think Saginaw will be, if it anyone is, I think Saginaw could be, and then just be an all OHL Memorial Cup final. But I think London's definitely there. But the way how dominant Moose Jaw was throughout the playoffs and just the stars that they got in this type of short time, I think a short tournament like this, I think it's those two teams. I think they're on a collision course for the Memorial Cup final. So I'm going to go with those two as well. So that's gonna be pretty easy. So who will win it? So we got London versus Moose Jaw. So Peter, who do you got winning it there?
This is probably the toughest question all night. I want to say it could be a toss-up, but at the same time, the way that London has handled the opposition, again, this is why we had that tournament to see who's going to be the best in each league. But the Saginaw Spirit were an absolute powerhouse, and London absolutely dominated them. And right when you think that the Oshawa Generals are going to come back into this game or in this series in game 3 and, try to say, hey, we're still alive, London crawls all the way back and shows that they have that mental toughness to crawl their way back in any situation and prove that they could come back down 5+ goals in one game and still win it. So I'm going to pick London as a result of that because they got the talent up front, back end as well on defense. I know we talked about Riley Mercer and how he could be the difference maker and how great his numbers are, but I know Michael Simpson's numbers aren't that great, but he's been in this spot before. I think after winning the OHL championship last year, losing it in the Memorial Cup, I think he wants to get some revenge back as well. Kind of like the London Knights London already got their revenge winning the OHL championship. It's not going to stop there. And I think Simpson is going to be a big reason why he could backstop them to the CHL championship. I just think that, again, there are very few flaws in London's game that won't make me think otherwise.
Yeah, it's a good choice. Like I say, it could be a toss-up between those teams, but I think London does definitely have a bit of an edge. So I'm going to go with them to win the Memorial Cup too. Dayton, you're going to make it a clean sweep, or you're going to go with Moose Jaw coming out?
I'm going with Moose Jaw, and I'll tell you why.
Do tell.
Yes. So I think pretty much they are very equivalent on paper. You've got very dominant goal scorers. Both a London Knight and a Moose Jaw Warrior led their respective playoffs in scoring. You've got two great, fourth forward defensemen in Oliver Bonk and Denton Matejchuk. And you've got two very strong goalies. One is a little bit more experienced, but one is he's shown that he can play against some of the top guys as well. What I think Moose Jaw has as an advantage is their top line is incredible. So if we compare the amount that they've scored, the Warriors had 4 of the 5 top goal scorers in the WHL playoffs, with Furcus, Matejchuk, Yager, and Savoy. Together, they put up 46 goals. That's pretty good. I don't believe London quite hit that. I'm doing a little bit of quick math here. Okay, so London's top guys had 42 goals. So, of course, one more. However, that was spread up in between the top 14 scores instead of the top 5. So they had a lot more even competition, whereas Moose Jaw really took it to the WHL. And I also think that based on the numbers, Moose Jaw has a slightly better goalie. Simpson has the experience. I think Unger has the skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that series, I'm going to keep coming back to it, against the Blades, really tested their mettle. That was a team that could have gone and arguably should have gone to the Memorial Cup this year. They built their team for the Memorial Cup. And playing in so many overtimes really challenged them, and they came up consistently as a team that just couldn't be shut down. So I think for that reason, London's going to have a handful on their hands. They're going to have a handful with Moose Jaw, and I think Moose Jaw takes home their first championship.
All right. Well, I mean, like, it can't really go wrong between the two. I mean, like you said, Peter, it could be you flip a coin and someone will win. It's going to be. I mean, if that is the final, I think that's going to be a really ridiculously good one, a really fun one to watch. So yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, our final one here. They name an MVP after the Memorial Cup. Last year was James Malatesta. This year, Peter, who do you got as Memorial Cup MVP?
As much as I want Eason Cowan to do a clean sweep of regular season and playoff MVP, I as much as I want him to become Memorial Cup MVP, I think it's going to go to Kasper Halttunen because of how big and how timely his goals have come. I mean, not necessarily timely, but especially I go back to that game 3 where they started to claw their way back, and Halttunen is scoring key goal after key goal to push him a little bit further. I think he's got a lot more left in the tank, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I can't imagine that his tank is anywhere near empty because of how many goals and how timely they are coming for him at this point. He came up clutch in that game. He's come up clutch at many points, and he's just again, I've already talked about how many goals he scored at both even strength and on the power play. He's a major threat offensively, and I think he's going to score some more some bigger goals in this tournament as well, because they relied on him heavily, and I think he's going to answer the call. So he's going to be my Memorial Cup MVP.
All right. Dayton, who do you have as your MVP?
I'm going to go with Denton Matejchuk. I think he has been, as the Warriors captain, just kind of the driving force behind so much of their team. He's a very intelligent defenseman. He's very quick. He can move the puck very well, but he also has those defensive instincts to make sure that the puck is not getting trapped in his own end. And I always thought his 12th overall selection was a bit high, at least based on the stats in his draft year. I don't think that anymore. He is a top 15 pick for sure after a 75-point season, 30 points in 20 games in the playoffs. He is one of the best defensemen not in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he will be a very big factor for the Warriors in this tournament.
Yeah, again, and that's another great pick. Even though I said the London Knights are going to win, I'm going Yager Furcus as my MVP. 61 goals in the regular season, 126 points. We already talked about how dominant he was there. He's clean in the playoffs, 14 goals and 32 points in 20 games. And I think, again, short tournament and how on fire he is already, I think he's going to end up scoring quite a bit throughout too. So Furcus is just the Seattle Kraken sure got a guy in the second round. I mean, 35th overall. Okay, that's very early in the second round, so he was close to being a first round pick. But I think, he's going to end up being a heck of a player in the NHL. I mean, such a big jump in points from 88 points to 126. And even in the playoffs, like actually last year he was ridiculously good in the playoffs too. He had 21 points in 10 games. So he's pretty much the same pace this time. So, I mean, he's a playoff performer, and that's a big thing. Even in junior, to be able to step up in these types of things with all the pressure, I think he's going to end up doing it in the Memorial Cup too. So Furcus is going to be my MVP. I guess the London Knights will still win, but he's still going to be MVP. That does happen. I mean, the MVP doesn't always come from the winning team. Mm-hmm. All right. Now let's do our prospects of the week as the Memorial Cup starts. I was going to mention when it starts, and that starts on Friday, the 24th. So tune into that. It's going to be a fun tournament. Lots of, like we said, lots of great teams in here. So make sure you're watching that one throughout the tournament, and we'll keep talking about it next week as well as it goes on. All right, let's do our prospects of the week. Dayton, I'll start with you. Who do you have highlighting this week?
Well, since I focused a lot on the Warriors today, I'm going to highlight somebody who we haven't talked very much about, and that's Brayden Yager, who I would argue has been the best puck mover on the Warriors in the playoffs. Against Portland, he had 6 points in 4 games, and I believe all of those, if not most of them, were assists. His point streak extends back into the previous series too. He has 7 points in 5 games, and he's just been that extra guy, the additional guy to get the puck to Furcus, to get it to Matthew Zator, to get it to Atlee Calvert, who has shown up in this playoffs as an undrafted player. Martin Rasavi, who is draft eligible. Jackson Kovacevic. These are guys who have just shown up for, scoring opportunities, and Yager has usually been the one to feed them the puck. And his point streak has been one of the better ones in the WHL right now.
Yeah, and then let's talk about that. How many guys there is that? I was gonna say 3-headed monster, but I guess it's 4. But the guys that they got, dominating at the top of the lineup there. So, Brayden Yager, he's got, that's a Pittsburgh Penguins draft pick, and we all know how bad the Penguins prospect pool is, so they're pretty excited, I think, having him in the system, because they don't have a lot of high-end guys.
I will say this: Yager at the draft combine last year said that he wanted to improve on his playmaking. It's definitely evident right now.
Yeah, so there you go. There's another guy. Again, we talk, watching in the Memorial Cup. So great prospect of the week too. All right, Peter, I know you have another guy that's in the Memorial Cup. Who do you want to talk about?
Again, I rarely be a homer with this, but I am going to pick Eason Cowan because he was, playoff MVP, and you probably could have given it to anyone else. I think maybe Kasper Halttunen had a good, reason to be that, but when you register 15 points in 4 games, that just seals it right then and there. He was absolutely dominant, and it may not score or may not show on the score sheet. He only had 3 goals, but he was dishing the puck nonstop. We talk about Halttunen scoring those timely goals, but Eason Cowan was involved in a lot of those goals very heavily. He started off with a 5-point game in game 1, a 3-point game in game 2, a 3-point game in game 3, which was that, 7-6 comeback. And, he had 4 points in game 4 with, a goal, and, basically his celebration that the crowd just basically stunned and silenced everybody. Again, we could talk about players that put the dagger through teams' hearts. Cowan did absolutely that, and pretty sure I'm pretty sure the team doesn't want to see Eason Cowan again. Hopefully, maybe he's at least in the NHL. I don't know, but if he's back next year, he's going to be dominant. But I think that there was probably you could have given the award to somebody else on London, but I think Eason really deserved it. So that is the reason why he's my prospect of the week, because of the dominant factor that he was in that championship series.
I don't think, there was a lot of, when he was drafted by the Maple Leafs, there was kind of some question marks. Why did he jump? Why did they keep him here in the first round?
Yeah.
Someone else.
A lot of us were saying that.
Man, I think we're eating whoever was saying, I mean, I know we all were saying it too.
Oh yeah.
Eating our words a bit,
Mhm.
not just a bit, a lot, because
A
he's
lot.
been great. And definitely deserving of a first round pick now that you see what he can do. And now probably, arguably, maybe the top prospect on the Maple Leafs now.
Oh yeah.
Fraser Minton's up there too, but Cowan's definitely, I would say, probably the top prospect at this
He
point.
is.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see how he does in the NHL next season because he's going to have a chance. All right. Mine is, I'm going to be a homer too. Canucks prospect Arturs Silovs, who was the Canucks starting goaltender throughout the playoffs. Demko was hurt to start. Once DeSmith went out after game 3 in the first round, it was Silovs net all the way and went through the whole Edmonton Oilers series against Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. Lots of NHL superstars, and he was getting shots on, and he was stopping a lot of them. Yes, Draisaitl beat him a few times on this one-timer, and I mean most goalies don't stop that. But Silovs, I mean, what a playoffs. And the thing is, I think he's probably solidifies his spot as a backup now, and DeSmith is going to be a free agent. So teams that want a backup, veteran backup, DeSmith's going to be on the free agent market because he's not going to come back to the Canucks. I don't see it, at least. I think Silovs is kind of, unless they think he's better off still being in the AHL and not just playing 15, 20 games, unless the Canucks do a Swayman Allmark type 1A, 1B, which wouldn't be the worst thing, how Silovs did in the playoffs. Very calm, cool, and collected. I mean, it didn't look like he was nervous at any point. Really, in the media, it didn't seem like he was rattled at all. So yeah, I'm really excited now to see what he can do in the NHL as I think, full-time backup next year, because, in the playoffs at one of the biggest pressure-filled time, he stepped up and didn't look like a rookie goaltender that only had a handful of games in the NHL. So kudos to Silovs. He had, I'm really proud that him being a prospect of the Canucks now, because not that I wasn't before. I mean, I thought he was one of the top guys even before, but I didn't think he had this in him to be a starter in the playoffs. So Silovs is my prospect of the week. All right. Well, that does it for us on Prospect Corner here this week. We went through our Memorial Cup preview. That's coming up on Friday, so make sure you're checking out that. Make sure you're checking out our Substack. Like I say, lots of great content coming up there already on there. If you want to take a look at all the stuff we already have on the Substack, lots of stuff coming on the HockeyWriters.com. We got prospect profiles running every day. We got quite a few coming out. We're closing in on the 100. We may be over that now. I'm not sure. But we are ramping it up. We've got already quite a few of the countdown feature articles out, the top 10 centers, top 10 goaltenders, all that stuff. Those will keep coming out too. We also got the writers mock draft coming. We ran that a couple days ago. So we've got a mock draft coming out too, in probably the next few days, Peter, right? So
looking to get it out next week. Yeah.
Next week. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. We went through it. We had all the writers kind of we just ran our mock draft, and some surprising picks at the top. So it was quite a bit different from what we did on our show last week. So yeah, stay tuned. But until next time, we'll see you on another episode of Prospect Corner.